Do you hear me well? Good morning, if you're watching via Zoom. Good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to this very last important session of the day. My name is Farah Al-Muslimi. This is actually my second day at Chatham House, where I will be covering Yemen and the Gulf. I'm still not sure what to make out of it, either empowerment and the trust or thrown under the bus. If you are to facilitate a panel the second day of your job. But anyways, I'm very honored today to have with me a very exceptional panel in this. I am not in any way expert in Lebanon, though as an Arab with a proper identity crisis, I consider myself a part-time Lebanese, let alone I lived 15 years where I did my studies in Lebanon. I lived there for quite a few years, and where I also had the chance very closely to engage with some of these exceptional speakers who are joining us today. Few reminders, this session is on the record. There is a translation, so if you also speak at one point in Arabic or in English, please be mindful with the speed of how you speak or how fast you speak for the translators. And in this session, I think we'll go for 1 hour and 15 minutes, and after that we will have a reception beyond that. You know, we have had a lot of sessions today going from different parts of the country. The one thing we can promise in this panel is there is no imposed hope. So you don't have to worry about that. You have a Yemeni facilitating a Lebanese conversation. It can't be more depressing. But anyways, Lebanon is a very important topic to have, I think, aside from our topic of contentious politics on the region and what we have been hearing throughout the day. It's a very important topic, I find it, because it's a demonstration and symbolizes of many things. It's an example of the failure of a modern nation state, post-colonization. It's also an example of how a promising and diverse a country can be, and no matter how small it is. It's also the ultimate example in the Arab world of how horrible power sharing formulas can do to societies, especially when they totally dismiss the idea of accountability. It's a very good example of the greed of capitalism and bankers. The Lebanese economic and banker class are such a fascinating that they managed all the way to steal the money of Yemeni and Iraqi and Syrians, not just Lebanese. It's unbelievable. You have hundreds of millions of dollars in Lebanese banks. So, and it's so much an example of also the total incapability of political class and ruling power. Ultimately, by the end of the day, Lebanon is 44,000 square kilometers. As my Lebanese friend Nabil Hassan would always go on a rant, he would say, I swear an intern can run this country. And just how much, again, it's also an example of how, I think, a failure of international mechanism of diplomatic. We have seen recently how it brought even Macron into a reality check. And it's, again, an example of destructive projection of power, external, proxy wars, a thriving militia, and all of that. And it's also an extreme example of the will and the commitment of the people. When you look to the Lebanese society since 2005, 2011, 2018, طلعت ريحتكم, the revolution, there is a society who's still somehow refusing to die and constantly trying to do this. And that's what this panel is actually more about. Not necessarily an imposed hope, but rather it is about looking, and what I love the brilliance of setting this panel, you have 4 different speakers who are doing similar but very different things on the ground in different ways, but what they all come into is as a statement, I would call it, on not giving up, on somehow trying to stand against this hope drain, not just a brain drain, which I think was what Lebanon and other countries are suffering from. I have taken too long of an introduction, so I will try quickly to introduce our panelists. And I must say I struggled with something I usually don't when I facilitate a panel in putting their bios, is how can you introduce people who really have inspired you? And that is the true story of this panel. If you look to Diana, she established Daraj Media, something she has been as journalist in the region as almost as old as I am. But she has been covering with the Daraj media is quite a good example for independent newspapers, true information, and not just on Lebanon also, but also in the larger region, and shaking boundaries with Daraj also on topics, not just politically, but also socially in that regard. I have Nizar Saghia also, to my extreme left, I think even politically, not just literally. He also runs the Legal Agenda, a fabulous publication, but also an organization that works on judiciary reforms. He is very well known in that regards. And again, I am not going to try to read their bios, but his work in matter of reforming the judiciary system. I also have Michel Helou, who's also runs the National Bloc political party in Lebanon. Had a very good experience of running for the elections. Still didn't give up, but it was something to try to hack the system from the inside and to shake it in Ba'abda, across demographic sectarian location that wasn't usually the Lebanese playbook of politics. And of course, last and definitely not least, we have Laury Haytayan, who also one of the very few. She's joining us on Zoom. I hope not from Lebanon, because that can go wrong any minute. But I think from somewhere in Europe. Brussels, okay, that's not assuring for London, but more. She's head of Taqaddum political party. She chairs a party, a new political party that actually also has one of two MPs in the parliament, quite exceptional in that regard. So let me start. I think I will go with Nizar first to talk about what you're trying to achieve via the legal agenda, but also at this moment of accountability. It's unaccountability, or the absence of accountability, is thriving in the region, and including in Lebanon. When you think about it, not a single person today is in jail for any reason. And as we say in Arabic, man amin al-aquba sa al-adab, who knows that there will be no punishment will most certainly misbehave. So failing or trying to fill that aspect of accountability, what opportunities is there now, especially in such a dark moment for Lebanon, if I may call it like that, but also with the collapse of the state structure. Can you tell us a bit about the legal agenda, but also on how you see the possibility of accountability in a country that no one wants to be held accountable for anything? Starting with you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Farah. So just legal agenda is a law and society project. So what we wanted really to do is to understand well our societies. And I'm saying societies because since the beginning we had a regional approach, and we wanted to make the comparison between different Arab countries. So we started in 2009. It was a pure coincidence that it happened 1 year before this Arab Spring, what we call the Arab Spring. So the main, if I have to talk about Lebanon, our diagnostic was that the problem, the status quo we are talking about, is the polarization, the sectarian polarization. So you have leaders from different communities who are, monopolizing everything. When I say everything, it's not only the public resources, but also the public debate. So when there is a problem, what is in the debate is the problems among them. I'm talking about 2010, 2011, but even before. And that because, they inherit the power from the war, and the civil war, which happened between 75 and 90. And when we had the amnesty law, that it was an amnesty for all political crimes, except, and this exception is very important and tells us a lot about the Lebanese regime, except the murder and the assassination against political and religious leaders. So in general, when you make an amnesty, general amnesty, you make an exception of crimes against humanity, war crimes, because you consider those crimes are the most important, because you consider the human being as the supreme norm. But when you make an exception for such assassination, that means that somehow, in your conception, the supreme norm is the leader. And this is a charismatic state, it's not a democracy. And that's why all the media were somehow distributed among them, the resources too, the corruption and everything, but also the public debate. And this is very important to know this, because before changing anything in the public decision, you should start by changing the public debate. So all our struggles started by how to put an end to this polarization, how to bring citizens again to be the acts of the public life, how to bring them to be the priority of any law or any, and we had in mind that maybe where we have to focus is judiciary, because there it's a somehow democratic arena where anybody can stand and say, it's my right, not in all countries, but at least in Lebanon. And it is a rational debate, and it's about individuals and about reality. So there are individuals coming, or at least it might be collective action, but whatever, it's putting, so how to make of this judicial work a play, a theater, where you have this life happening and everybody covering it, media, and so we think like this, maybe we can change a little the interest of the media, and we change the public debate, and we have again the citizens in the front. Of course, if you want to have this theater as it should be, you should improve the enlightenment, you should improve everything. So you have to reform judiciary, and you have to reform the judge himself. And so we started actually with three aspects of our work. First, monitoring judiciary, litigating in front of judiciary, but also trying to reform judiciary. And we started preparing draft laws. So those draft laws we knew, we started in 2014 working on that, and we knew that it would be very difficult because the parliament is totally them. Those we are fighting against. But we thought that, let's start this battle about justice. We are not going to say that judiciary is part of the regime. We are fighting with the regime on judiciary, how to get back this judiciary. And we started working with judges to encourage them to have an association of judges, which happened in 2018. But it was a long term because, judges, when they were left alone, they were looking for a protector. And this protector should be a politician. When they come together, they have some kind of solidarity, they start to be independent. So they start to say no to the leaders. And we start having more and more social life happening without leaders always to be in the center. So, that was our aim, how to free the judiciary from this polarization, how to make of them protector of citizens, whatever they are, and to, maybe I have to stop here but with judiciary that comes accountability. Mm-hmm. With polarization, it's impunity. With judiciary, it becomes principles. While with leaders, it's only bargaining about whatever and no principle at all. With judiciary, you have the citizens. There, you don't have. The citizens are just followers. And the most important, the public interest notion, which disappeared totally from Lebanon. It's within a discussion about law and legal issues.
We'll come back into that. But I think I like how it has very clear idea in your head, the triangle of public narrative, of fighting amnesty, and of trying to fix it from the inside. We'll come back into that conversation specifically on how do you own back the narrative and bring back the politics, but also the super pragmatic attempt to look for the good guys inside, including the judiciary, and work with them in regaining their institution back from the corrupt politicians.
Maybe to talk also about what happened after 2019 with the collapse and the blast and all the accountability process which are now ongoing.
We'll come back into that and we'll look into it more specifically, but I wanted to go back actually to the parliament end of, okay, if this is the function or the space you're looking at from the judiciary, the laws, then maybe it would be good to hear from you, Laury, about specifically how does this law, legality and accountability legislation looks like, or the battle, how does it look like from a political party that's new, that's led by women, but also that have more or less hacked the system and have had two inside the parliament, which if you know Lebanon well, it's quite impressive and exceptional. Can you tell us a bit on that efforts you're doing, but also from the political, from the parliamentary bloc, and then we can go back into the other topics of that. But the floor is yours, Laury, and I think, is there anything I should do or it should speak? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, Farah. Congratulations for your new position at Chatham House, and thank you for Chatham House and Lena for accepting to invite me and to speak online. I know everybody is so much, there is fatigue about online speakers or panels, but I appreciate that you gave me the floor, even if I'm away, I'm across the channel in Brussels. So thank you for the question, and let me say first that as Taqaddum, as you said, it's a political party that had been established after the revolution, and mainly it's a democratic, progressive, secular party working for social justice and sustainable development. As you said, we do have two members of parliament today, and actually, if you wanted, we are a bigger bloc than one of the presidential candidates today. So we're bigger than him, represented in the parliament. So that's one thing. Second, I guess it's important to understand that yes, the approach was in 2022 with the elections. The approach was like we need to fight from inside, and we need to break the system that we don't like that has been put since 1990. To fight it from inside. We've been for long, and many of us have been fighting the system from outside the system. We were like able to make some gains, but it was as well we wanted to attempt to fight it from inside. And this is why most of the newly established political parties wanted to really run for the elections and play that role. And today, definitely, there are a lot of lessons to be learned about that fight. But this is an important milestone in that continuous fight against the regime and the system that had been established since 1990, which was like actually, as Nizar said it, no transitional justice process. All those who were like the cause of our sufferings and that caused the war in Lebanon, they just removed their military suits and put their military uniforms and put the suits and entered into the institutions, and they run the institutions in the militia mentality. So we do believe that definitely accountability is a cornerstone for any new setup that is going to be built in the country. We cannot have a new system. We cannot have a new Lebanon if there is no accountability. And everyone has to be accountable. And this is the fight today. They are trying to do everything so that they're not going to be held accountable. And this is the fight for us. And that's why, like, we do support all the efforts that are being put within the civil society organizations about anything related to the judiciary, to the independence of the judiciary. And this is actually one of the most important fights that we have to fight so that we build that cornerstone. If we fail to build that, we are going to continue with the system or maybe build something semi-new, but on the foundations that are not strong. And this is our fight from within, and this is our fight from outside as a political party, regardless if we have representation in the parliament or not. So we're doing the fight in the parliament. After all, we are two MPs as Taqaddum, but we do ally we have allies and others that are fighting the fight, and from outside as a political party supporting any kind of activity that goes into that accountability, because it's very important not to let go. And again, from 1990 till 2020 or 2022, we had what it's called Afallah Amma Mada, and I don't want to see like another phase of Lebanon with the same attitude and as if business as usual and it continues, because there has been a lot of fighting and a lot of experiences that have been built and a lot of effort that has been put in the country to reach where we are reaching today. So we do have new political parties that had been established. We do have parliamentarians within the parliament. We need to support this kind of experience so that these newly formed political parties become stronger and stronger, so that we build on this now, so that we are able in 2026 to have more representation from the new political parties and put the others aside, so that we are able to build that new system that we want, which is based on democracy, accountability, and equal values.
Very useful, thank you. And I'll come back to that. Specifically, I have also a follow-up question in regards to your other hat, which is also oil and energy, and probably what you think that can happen in that regard in the parliament, because you're going to have a new black hole there for another bunch of spoils of force, and I'm keen to pick your brain on that. But before that, maybe I want to go
I would
back.
love to.
Yeah, let's go back to that in a second, but maybe, Michel, you can elaborate a bit also. What you have at the National Bloc is a similar, not a similar, you had an old, actually historical political party, but you give it some sort of a rebirth, somehow 2.0, and you fought also into a parliamentary bloc elections. So it'd be good to hear your thoughts on that, and obviously if similar synergies, challenges, but also where do you fit within the larger big shark systems as new, not as new, as small and progressive political parties? Anything you can add into what Laury said, please?
Sure. Thanks a lot, Farah, again, for having us in Lino. I totally agree with what Nizar and Laury said, especially about accountability and the importance of that in Lebanese politics today. But let us come back a little bit to the situation. I think it's important to notice that Lebanon today is collapsing, and that we can even go as far as saying that the country, as we knew it, doesn't exist anymore. And I think it's important to be very realistic on the extent of the collapse that we're going through, especially that it's very specific because it's a very strong regression. It's not just a collapse. We used to have a state that was quite unique, I think, in the 1920s and then 1940s. The way it was built, we had very, interesting institutions, at least for the region. So there was something quite unique that has been basically collapsing gradually since 1975. And we're not able, unfortunately, despite some attempts, we're not able to stop this collapse until now. And it's a double collapse. There's, on one hand, collapse of the institutions gradually. And on the other hand, and I think this is something pretty critical, especially the last 2-3 years, it's a demographic collapse. The country is being emptied, and it's not the first time that it happens. It happened in 1915, it happened in 1989, mostly in 1990 during the Civil War with the massive immigration. And now again, we're going through 2-3 years of absolutely massive immigration, similar to probably what has been happening in Syria in terms of numbers. So the country is really being emptied from its youth, and I think this is really threatening the future of our country. However, we have gone through very, let's say, hopeful years and interesting years of political change. I'd say from 2015 till today, 8 years where movements like Taqaddum, Laury's movement, were created, where our party was relaunched. So yeah, I am now leading a historic political party that was launched in the 1930s, 1940s, that took part in the creation of the Lebanese state, and that then disappeared completely from the political scene because it refused to take arms during the Civil War. So from 1976 till more or less 2019, the party was away from the political scene. And now it has relaunched with, say, totally new people and vision, etc., in line with the same values, but with a totally new setup. It was relaunched during this phase, which was quite interesting, I think, which started in 2015 when people went down to the streets because they were basically drowning in their own garbage. It was a very fascinating time. It's actually the moment where I moved to Lebanon because I was born and raised abroad, like probably a lot of you. I think we're all a mix of diaspora and local Arabs. So I came to Lebanon this summer of 2015, and I was always, very disappointed by this, how apathetic the Lebanese were, how apathetic we were in front of the collapse of the state, in front of the situation of the country. And okay, it took us to really have to live in our own garbage to wake up, but at least this awakening was very interesting. And it led to a, important protest, and then to a translation into politics during the municipal elections of 2016. And then the same thing happened again on a larger scale with what we call the revolution, the Thawra, in 2019, that actually had its political translation in the elections of 2022, where Laury and us ran. We were allies. They had 2 MPs. I lost, but by not much, and it was my first attempt. I was completely new in Lebanese politics, and it gave me a lot of hope because I actually understood that, well, democracy still kind of works. So obviously it's clearly not the Swiss democracy that we have in Lebanon. I was born and raised in Geneva, so I know what Swiss democracy looks like. It's not the same, but still, one main learning that I took away from these elections is that we cannot take democracy for granted, and especially in Lebanon, we cannot take elections for granted, because a lot of people in the revolutionary movement, which we were part of, were saying, let's not take part in elections, we need to take the regime down and take the whole system down, etc. I think this is very dangerous, and I asked myself the question several times, like, how far should we go in this revolutionary process, etc. I think that avoiding elections is very dangerous because it can destroy what remains of democracy in our country, and it's really something we cannot take for granted, especially given what's happening in the whole region. So this was, I think, something very critical, and I took a lot of hope, I gained a lot of hope through my experience in elections, especially in a constituency that was extremely hard, being the stronghold of Hezbollah and an area that is very diverse culturally. Now, to not spend too much time and give a bit more time to everyone, I'd say that now the biggest battle that we're facing is how to keep the momentum, because we were able to create some hope, we were able to show that change is possible in Lebanon, but now we're kind of stuck because we have a minority bloc in parliament, but I think that this bloc, unfortunately, is not mature enough. We're not working, and we are supporting them very, very strongly, but we are not working, let's say, as a modern parliamentary bloc should be working, and we are losing leverage of powers. We're not finding the proper leverage to basically change the course of things. So now the biggest challenge that we have in the coming years will be to basically keep the pressure on the people in power, on the regime in power, through movements on the ground, through lobbying, through the international community, will be to keep our narrative, develop our narrative of change. Yes, change is possible in Lebanon. We're not forced to go back to the parties of the civil war. We need to keep working with the civil society movements. Nizar and Diana are exceptional examples of that, and we need to be translating their work in the political arena, and I think this is absolutely critical. And finally, we need to get prepared for the upcoming elections. And here, I think we're still not, I'd say, even serious or mature enough in our approach of politics. We need to be at the same time very idealistic and at the same time very pragmatic. There are municipal elections coming soon. It's probably one of the very few occasions we have to reclaim our state, and reclaiming the state will start from the local level, as we've discussed this morning in the panels. So it is absolutely necessary that we get ready, that we show that us parties, we're not just, a local Beiruti intelligentsia that stops at AUB. No, we are also present on the ground, from Trablos to Nabatiye, in the villages, etc. We need to show that we are anchored, that we're rooted at the local level in order to really make change. The context is against us today. But I think that the context actually changes So we need to basically get ready for when the context will be a bit more positive and make this change happen, because it will happen.
We didn't agree to be optimists, but I like it. Though, anyways, I think
I'm not optimistic. I'm just trying to be positive on what we can do. But
I like the idea. I think
to be honest,
what you're describing is also something extremely important, which is usually young politicians try to avoid. We're not going to elections. They go follow McKinsey on Twitter, but you're like, no. Let's go back to the roots. Let's try to renew it. You almost manage the party like you did to the newspaper, some sort of a progressiveness, information. And I think that's very clear and very important to keep in mind. And then we can talk more about how it was, despite the context. It was actually a promising day, not promising, but standing days for Lebanese people the last few years. And I think also that the Thawra was an Arab Spring 3 or 2nd after Sudan, Algeria. So it's important not to forget that. I take that. And I'll come back to the question of diaspora. It's very important to see, because also it's a unique place, I think, for Lebanese and the opportunities there. But before that, back to you, Diana. And I have quite a few questions, but okay, now we have looked into civil society in the traditional sense and judiciary. We have looked into political parties, also another political parties. I wonder if we can speak a bit more about your experience. And the two immediate questions that came to my head was, when you started Daraj, what were you thinking? Because really, there is something simple in that. And you and the other co-founders of it, you're not people without agency. You're not people who actually can't have a very job anywhere easy in Lebanon or outside for a very little effort, for a less of a headache, and for not running after donors or anything. So I'm really interested in that moment, as it is, as personal as it seems. And then the other question maybe is to zoom out of Lebanon, from your experience also from Afghanistan to Yemen to Iraq, if there is any trends you can tell us about this attempt to struggle, whether as an activist or as a media, in that regards. Anything with your also wider regional experience would be very useful. And then we can come back to another round of questions, but over to you.
Thank you, Farah. Thank you, Lina, and thank you, Chatham House. I will not make a long story, but I started working as a journalist the year the war ended in 1991. So I started experiencing Lebanon and working as a journalist in the Lebanon that is governed by the equation that Nizar spoke about, which is evasion of justice, that warlords giving amnesty to themselves and running the country, by another equation or another factor of the equation, which is regional power controlling the country, I mean Syrian and Iranian, through Hezbollah and controlling political atmosphere in the country. And you have a major factor, which is the new business elite in the country, whether bankers or entrepreneurs, sorry if I'm spelling it correct, but this phenomenon has dominated the landscape of Lebanon. Entrepreneurs, and then we discovered they are part of the collapse that we suffered from in 2019. So these three pillars controlled the scene in Lebanon. Warlords, bankers, and the business elites, and the regional power represented by Syrians and Syrian regime and Iranian influence in the country. If you move forward and you look at the Beirut port explosion and the financial collapse, you will find links to the same leaders who managed to give themselves amnesty in the civil war. Those who are responsible for Beirut port explosion are officials, are leaders, and even the president of the republic who knew about the explosion. They were all part of the Lebanese civil war and evaded justice. If you look at the collapse of the banking system and stealing the depositors, thousands of depositors, Lebanese depositors, you will find the same trace. What I'm saying is, impunity, lack of justice created not only the civil war, the Beirut blast, and now we have the financial crisis that the Lebanese are suffering. And if we keep avoiding this justice, if we don't keep working for ensuring justice for the Lebanese, we will create another cycle of explosion and hardship, because it's not over yet. So When I started working as a journalist with this context of who is running the country, the media was part of that. I worked in mainstream media that was politically funded. I didn't only work in Lebanon, but also worked regionally. I wrote as a columnist in one of the mainstream Arab newspapers. It was governed by political ceiling. At that time, I worked under a compromise. I cover stories or I write topics that are not compromised. The stories that I cannot address properly, I will not tackle. But after the Arab Spring, after 2011, after the bloodshed, after refugees, wars, crisis, after the counter-revolutions that we have all witnessed by dictatorships, autocrats, and religious parties, it was impossible to keep that equation. And then we're talking about tech explosion tech available to everyone after 2011. So then when we started thinking, it's about time to create something that does not belong to Qatar or Iran or Syria or Saudi Arabia or any religious or political party. Something that's really real journalism. And this is the idea of Daraj. It came from here. Daraj is a noun meaning steps in Arabic, and we felt like we are in a hole. So we're not looking for hope, Muhammad. We were looking just a way out. So there was no hope at that moment. It's just practical decision to find our way out. This is why we created Daraj. It was founded in 2017. We address topics from investigative stories related to Lebanon, Iraq, Yemen, Syria. And one of the highlights that we were proud of is, if you look at Lebanon, the collapse of the financial system in Lebanon, and those who are in charge, mainly we have the central bank governor in Lebanon, Riyad Salemi, who is a gatekeeper for all the political parties in the state. Our stories, in collaboration with other partners, international partners, were part of the international investigations in Europe and several European countries against him. We couldn't in Lebanon because of the political interference in judiciary. We couldn't initiate a proper investigations against those who are responsible for the collapse. And I think Nizar can speak better than me in that. But again, trying to ensure some kind of justice to what happened to Lebanon. I think this is our role as journalists, not only in Lebanon. We have a similar case in Iraq. Hopefully soon it will materialize. Just yesterday, we got a warning from one of the bankers in Lebanon, Marwan Khairuddin, who was one of those who were in charge of the collapse. We published a story during our collaboration with ICIJ, the Pandora Papers. The title of the story was using a quote by a Lebanese journalist, Mohammed Zbib, who was attacked by Marwan Khairuddin gangsters and hit him, the head of the gang. We used this title, so he is trying to sue us because we used this title quoting Mohammed Zbib. It's not the only law case. So far we have several cases against us in Lebanon. I don't know if we might have something abroad, but again, the context that in Lebanon we still can work as civil society, as media, as new faces trying to enter the political sphere. You cannot look at Lebanon without the regional context. Unfortunately, this kind of work is not possible anymore for our partners and colleagues in Syria, in Iraq, in the Gulf, in Egypt. So Lebanon has turned, I wouldn't say a safe haven, but it's a place you still can function with all, we do have limitations, we do have a mounting intimidation. We've been all accused of being agents of the West, Zionists, or name it, you know the list. So the challenges are mounting, but the possibility to work is still there. And just to end with a small sentence, I'm not working because I'm hopeful. I don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, but this is my response to what happened to us. I am one of the Lebanese who survived the blast. I lived the civil war. I've survived so many deaths, not only in Lebanon, but also abroad. I'm one of the depositors who my savings have been stolen by the banks and the political elite. What would I do? I don't want to leave the country. I want to stay. And at least if this is my response, then let it be. So it's not about hope. It's about a battle that we have to take and we have to go through.
It's really hard to say anything into that, or to even summarize it, but I do want to come back with one question, which is, if you can draw us with your experience any trends in the region, like from Sudan to Libya to Yemen, from the conflicts you covered, and how similar warlords are and victims are, maybe, or not. But I'll come back into that, into one question. I'll go back to you, Nizar, with what she's saying of the possibility of the law there, but within the limitation also, within whatever there as a legislation or wannabe legislation, how can we further connect the dots together? If you're looking into accountability within the judges, within the reform, and MPs are looking into it in different and political parties, and so is the media, what do you think is the missing piece right now in matter of within what's there, forcing some sort of accountability in the country? Whether, is it domestically, is it internationally? Is there any missing piece you can comment on?
I think the people who are responsible of all this are trying to close all the windows, and we have to open all the windows. Good. I mean, for example, they are trying to obstruct and systematically any prosecution for financial robbery or corruption or in the Blast case. But in the same time, they are trying to misinform the public about what happened in those cases. And this is another aspect that Diana might develop more. I mean, the misinformation in the media, you have no idea what it is. I mean, in the primary, hours, they are talking about trying to innocent the bankers, and because the bankers are the sole people who pay now for advertisement. But this lie is happening every day. And they are trying to target any judge who is trying to open any file to prosecute. So the judge becomes the accused person, and the bankers who robbed all the country, they are the innocent who are subject to, selective case or whatever. So if you want to talk about accountability now, it's not enough to talk about what happened in judiciary. You should talk about what's happening in media, but also in the parliament. I mean, this is the role where all this all these efforts can be complementary, because you have to fight on all these fronts, because the others are there on all the fronts. Sorry to talk about others, but it's the way we do in Lebanon, and it's not for nothing that in 2019 one of the main slogans was "Kullun yani kullun." All means all. That means all the leaders. In fact, it was targeting the regime, the charismatic regime, and to say that all of us citizens should unite against those leaders. So every citizen against any single leader. This was the main slogan of the uprising. And we are feeling that very well now. For example, can you imagine the people who are or suspect to be guilty in the blast? They are cooperating with the people who are suspect of making corruption and robbery together and using the same instruments in order to obstruct justice. So this gave you an idea about this cooperation in order to ensure the impunity. Now they are, I'm not going to go into details, but they are using an article in the civil proceedings which enable any defendant to go to ask for the removal of the judge, and the case is suspended automatically till the court is heard this case and say if it is founded or not. But where is the surprise? The court is no more existing because they didn't appoint the judges inside this court. So the investigation is suspended automatically and for a limited period, and even for I don't know how many years. And that's what happened with the blast, which is the most dangerous crime. For 1 year and 1 month, the judge was suspended just because there is one defendant who made this kind of case to stop it. So And this impunity system, which is, so now it's taking the people are witnessing this, and they are aware about what's happening. And before, I mean, the impunity was made through interference with judges, but in very discreet way, and they were able to reach their targets. But now there are judges who dare. There are judges who are supported somehow by society or encouraged by the social mobilization. So they are doing, I mean, somehow they are doing a blunt way to obstruct them. And this is what's happening, and people are witnessing this. The debate about immunities in Lebanon is really important. And we discovered suddenly that any public servant has immunity, and maybe will never be able to prosecute. So all this is now in the middle of the struggle in Lebanon. But what is really important, there are some judges who are now who accept to affront, to make the confrontation, and who don't shut up, and who don't give up. And as far as they don't give up, I mean, the struggle will continue there.
Good. Before I want to come back to Laury and question on oil, and you to Michel about diaspora, and then open it up. But before that, can you say in 50 seconds something on the larger idea of accountability that is talking about, like from a media point of view? You say one example of it is you have a suitcase, but how do you define it in the larger sense, what you're doing or how do you coin it in the set of accountability?
Thank you for this question, because one of the examples that we're working on is collaborating with diaspora, independent lawyers who are working from diaspora. And that led to one of the cases that were actually two cases initiated against one of the banks in Lebanon, because one of the depositors have two nationalities, one Lebanese and one British. So they are suing Lebanese bank, the British citizen, to take their deposit. We have another case that is being launched in the States from victims of the Beirut blast who have double nationality, dissidents or related to, I'm not quite sure the nationality thing, but this collaboration between media, when you expose a story, expose corruption, expose a crime, with other aspects of civil society seeking justice, is really key to try to ensure judiciary functioning properly.
Good. And I will switch the order then and come back to you, Michel, in that case with her question about diaspora, or her answer in diaspora. Specifically, as a political party, you're always focused on your electors, voters, the ground. It's a unique case of Lebanon. You have double the society outside the country. There's a very easy, obvious way of making the best of that, and that's remittance. But politically, how can you capitalize on that as a political party, and also even as a legality procedures, keeping in mind what Diana is saying? But as a political party, specifically leader, how do you view this diaspora aspect in whatever you do?
I think it's much wider than that, actually. It's not just remittances. Historically, the Lebanese diaspora has played a critical role in the country, be it culturally. You had writers in North America, in New York, and at the time of the Nahda, Gibran Khalil Gibran and others who were publishing Arabic newspapers in the United States. You had obviously financial support, as you said, the remittances. You had it also played a critical social role, humanitarian role, as we've seen after August 4. But this is also something much older. And there's always been this movement of back and forth between Lebanon and and abroad, Africa, Latin America, Europe, the Gulf, etc. Today, and for the first time, the diaspora has been able to play a political role, and I think this is something absolutely critical. And we've seen it in the elections of last May 2022, where approximately 140,000 Lebanese voted abroad. And they played a key role in the victory of some change MPs. And I think this is basically what we have to build upon. Now, this is not enough. What we also need to do, given the extent of the emigration, what we have to do is kind of reinvent ourselves politically, how to build on the energy, the skills and the capacities of the diaspora, but also largely, in a larger way, how to benefit from the diaspora to rebuild the Lebanese society. So that means that basically, first, funding, obviously to fund our political activities, we need the diaspora because now most of the people that have financial wealth are abroad. We need to map this diaspora abroad. We don't know how many Lebanese there are abroad. We don't know who has a passport, who doesn't have, because a lot of them emigrated in 1860 to Brazil. Obviously, they're not on the electoral list. We need to prepare them to run for elections, because today, it's like 70% of a class, probably, I'd say, that is leaving. So all the graduates, all the people that we will build our future on are abroad. So we need to keep this tie with them very strongly, and we need to keep them interested in what's going on in Lebanon, and we need to prepare them. And I will personally come back and bring them from the UK, from Paris, from New York, for them to run in 2026. And this is what I've been doing a lot during the elections, actually. While campaigning, I came several times to Europe, and after campaign, I keep coming because there's more and more people, and there's a lot of potential, actually, so we need to build on that. But in a larger way, I think that what's really at stake is the survival of the Lebanese society, of the idea of Lebanon as a whole. If we're not able to keep the diaspora in some way tied to the motherland, to Lebanon, Lebanon won't exist as we knew it. And I think that we need to take as examples what the Armenians have been doing, what the Palestinians also have been doing recently. I think that especially the last 2 years, the Palestinian uprising happened a lot. Also, thanks to the diaspora, thanks to the involvement of a lot of Palestinians in the US and abroad. So this is what we need to do, take our inspiration from that, and make sure that one day those people will at least have the option of coming back.
Good, and I think what's lucky in Lebanon is you have very good higher educational rate that actually when Lebanese are abroad, it makes a lot of difference compared, for example, to Yemenis and other societies which have not had the chance to build a strong diaspora in voice even in that. Good. I'll come back to you, Laury, with my obviously question on how you think we can do on oil and energy, specifically to make sure that's not a hole, but from a parliamentary point of view. But really anything you also wanted to add to what our exceptional colleagues here have said, feel free to do so, and then I'll open it up to questions immediately after that. Go for it.
Yep, thank you again. So let me say a couple of things before going into the oil and gas issue in Lebanon. So definitely the political class, these are the masters of political survival. They know how to survive, and we've seen since 2019 at least how they have used whatever they can to survive, and they're still able to do that. And unfortunately, this is something that is working with the international community, and the international community is still not is still like kind of okay with this political class that has ruined a whole society, that has bankrupted a whole country, that has stolen people's savings, that they're still acceptable to run the country because they are good in survival. And one example is the issue of the maritime delimitation with Israel, to the point that Hezbollah was ready to do a deal with Israel and with the U.S. at the same time when Hezbollah was accusing the U.S. and others that they were sanctioning the whole country and they were blocking the whole country and we were under siege by the U.S. But at the same time, Hezbollah made a deal with Israel and with the U.S. so that they could survive and so that they can still get the okay of the U.S. and the international community to continue running the country. And we have seen, again, the French who are speaking 24 hours to Hezbollah and the U.S. administration who's okay with Hezbollah as long as they can get deals, such as the maritime development, maritime delimitation between Lebanon and Israel. And this is something that needs to be repeated and repeated. This is the survival mode. But at the same time, they are shaken. So to go back to the parliament, when we had our parliamentarians in the parliament, and they were like the 12 or the 13 at that time, and with others, they were like going all the time by the book, and they wanted the head of the parliament, the speaker of the parliament, Nabil Berri, which has been there for 30 years, they wanted him to go by the book. And we discovered that he has forgotten how a parliament works, because he had been used to do the things as the bazaar, thinking that he is running a bazaar. And when our MPs were really there to hold him accountable and to show to the whole world that the guy is not in control, he doesn't even know how to run the parliament. So that is very important. And when Hezbollah and the leader of Hezbollah is not anymore that person that no one can talk about or criticize, this is very important. So there are a lot of achievements that are happening. Now, to go back to oil and gas, definitely oil and gas will not save the economy of the country. Oil and gas is not going to save Lebanon from the crisis it is in. For Hezbollah, it had taken the decision that, yes, we will put all our weight on that sector. That's why we will facilitate even a deal on the maritime borders if it gives us any kind of guarantees that the oil and gas sector will relaunch in the country, because this is their way to get away from any IMF program that will impose reforms on the country. And these reforms mean the end of the political regime and the end of these people, the thugs that have been ruling the country since 1990. So Hezbollah is playing an important role on putting that emphasis with the Free Patriotic Movement and the rest, and others as well in the government or in the political class, saying that you don't need the IMF program, we don't need anything, we will get money from the oil and gas, and this is how we are going to be rich again, and we don't need anyone, which is wrong, which is completely wrong. And this is something that they are playing that card within the people, within the population, and population is really kind of believing that. And here we come to the misinformation and fake information that are spread 24/7 in media in Lebanon and in the social media. This is part of it, that we are going to be very rich with oil and gas, which is wrong. And the other point is very important. Today in the parliament, there are 4 laws related to the sovereign wealth fund, because according to the law that was passed in 2010, all the revenues from the oil and gas sector need to be put in a sovereign wealth fund. 4 laws from different political parties are on the table to decide about the sovereign wealth fund. With the composition of this current parliament, it is impossible to trust this parliament to set up a sovereign wealth fund law that is going to kind of guarantee the revenues are in a safe place, or that are managed in a safe place. Before, we used to say that the central bank might be that place where we trust, we put our money. Today, we have discovered that the central bank governor is no less than like bad than what we have, like the political class, and we cannot trust. Today, you have no entity, no institution in the country that we can trust them with the revenues of the oil and gas. Not to say that these revenues will not come anytime soon. But again, today they are studying and they're looking into a sovereign wealth fund about funds that will come later, about revenues that will come very much later, and about no vision for the country. Today, you don't have any vision for the country about the political or the economic outlook of the country. You don't know where your country will be in 10 years because you don't have any plan and any roadmap that will take you from A to Z or to B, and where then you can decide how to use the revenues of the sovereign wealth fund and to grow your economy. Therefore, today they are only looking at the sovereign wealth fund from a position of who is going to control the sovereign fund and who is going to benefit from it. So we go back to what they do. It's like dividing the pie among themselves. And then you will have a board of trustees or a governing board or whatever managing body to the sovereign wealth fund, which definitely has to respect the confessional and sectarian division. So so you have to have 3 Muslims with 3 Christians, and how to choose them. All of that. This is what they're concerned of today. And the last thing they are concerned of is to do the reforms, is to really have an economic outlook of where the country is going to be in years. They are doing nothing about it. Since 2019, they've been unable to agree with the IMF on a deal. It's not because they don't have the technical capacities, because this is on purpose. They don't want to have an IMF deal. For them, an IMF deal puts an end to the clientelism system, puts an end to this political class, and they don't want to have an IMF deal. You know what's the deal that they have? It's the laissez-faire. Oh, people cannot buy anymore. They don't have money for the generators, for the electricity. It's okay. They're putting solar panels. Perfect. Whoever can put the solar panel, they're putting it. They're going off the grid. So after a while, 700 megawatts that are being produced now will be sufficient for the rest that are they are still dependent on the grid. This is how they're doing. The depositors, again, every time there are these decrees or this ta'amim, whatever they call it, by the central bank governor, that is kind of pushing you to take your money with the loss, of course, and then day after day, the number of depositors is shrinking. The rest, they can manage, or they will be their friends, so they know how to divide again the losses among themselves. But the big loss is on the people. So the laissez-faire policy is intentional because they just want to keep in power without any accountability. And this is their system. So they're very smart in that, and we have to be smarter than them and fight them, and at least have these spaces like Chatham House to really tell people what these people are doing. And it's a shame to see that the international community is still supporting these people because they're afraid that there will be refugees coming to Europe, or because there are deals that this political class can still make with specific governments that want to make deals because they need to have power in the Eastern Mediterranean. This is a shame. There are people that are dying in the country, and don't think that if you still cover for the political class, you will not have the refugees coming. They are coming. Those who were strong economically, they are already in Europe. Those who are poor, they are coming. The refugees are coming. The Lebanese refugees with the Syrian refugees are coming. You cannot stop them if you still support the political class. And I'm really sorry to hear that today in the UK you are discussing about this new asylum law, which is a shame to hear what we are hearing. But again, thank you for giving me the time.
I wish I can vote in Lebanon. I would vote for you. But we have to wrap it there in your end. Let me take some questions from the hall. If anyone has any questions, please raise your hand and wait for the microphone to arrive there. Please make sure to introduce yourself and say your name. And please remember that we have a translator, so do speak slowly when you ask your question, and don't let it go beyond 30 seconds. I will cut you if you do. If you don't believe that, try me. Let's start with you.
I'm afraid to ask. Okay, thank you very much. My name is Mohammed Al-Attar. I'm a Syrian theater maker and writer. My question is specifically for Michel and Laury. I'm sorry, I will be pretty cynical. I'm still not convinced that participating in this political process is something fruitful, especially after the last election. I'm Syrian, not Lebanese, but I lived in Lebanon. I'm trying to stay in a good contact with the Lebanese context because it's very important for us also in Syria. So I just want you briefly to elaborate why, because in my opinion, the Lebanese regime is clever enough, is vicious enough to continue, and this is what's happening.
Okay, so does it worth it?
Yeah.
This lady there in the back, please.
Yeah.
Next, I'll take more than one question, and then we come back to the panel. Please, yes.
Thank you. I'm going to compliment Mohammed Sheikh Abu Hilal. I'm going to be the devil's advocate, even though I agree with him. Killun yani killun, that's what happened in Tunisia, and we have a president who's a populist who is destroying democracy. So my question is for everyone. What vision do you have? If you're defending working within the system, what does that mean? And do you really think you can overcome the system? If you think that there's no work within the system and you need to work from outside, are you prepared for what comes after the system's collapse?
Okay, so third question from her, and then we'll take it, and then we'll come back. We have 15 minutes, so don't worry.
Thank you. I'm Hilda, Center for International Peace Building. I want to ask you a rather challenging question. It sounds to me that you're all standing your ground and that you have more or less been put in the position of resistance, where the most courageous, the most productive thing you can do is to just stand your ground while the system around you collapses.
What's the question in that?
That was the question. Is this something that you are considering? Because I can't see what choices you have.
Okay, can you take the last two questions, the two of you? Good. Good. No. Yeah, take the last questions, the two, and then we'll come back to the Parliament one.
So yes, I mean, it's a kind of sense of responsibility to continue doing what we consider as enabling the society to defend itself as much as it can. I consider my objective like this. I mean, to enable society in as far as we can to defend itself. And I think this is the objective now. So, of course, we have to resist. We are not going to have a philosophical thinking, what is the meaning of life now, but I think it's, it's like this. It's a sense of responsibility. We should do this thing, and we cannot conceive our role to be otherwise. For Kullun, this is, I mean, just to comment, I mean, this is a regime where there is a polarization, a hegemony of leaders on everything. So I am not saying that they are going to disappear and citizens will take the power suddenly like this. But let's start the process of stopping this hegemony. I mean, if you don't have any more hegemony, but they are somehow very powerful, it's different. And that's what's happening now. They have no more hegemony. There are voters who went, maybe the majority voted for them in the last election, which were not democratic, because they were exploiting the needs of people, mostly. But I mean, these people are no more going to vote for them for emotional or identity reasons. They are going to vote for them for need only. And if they have any other possibility to vote for others, I mean, they will do. So this is different. I mean, there is no more this, I mean, there are no more, they don't believe anymore in those leaders. They don't vote for them because they have to vote for them. They vote for them in exchange of something really very precise, of services, of needs. So there is no more hegemony in Lebanon now, but they are still very powerful. And I think this is a progressive way, and will take a long time, of course, before having any real democracy. But it is where we have to start and where we have to continue. Yeah, but just one thing, maybe it's the last time as I have to talk. So the amnesty law, which was in 2091, when it passed, somehow the society was very tired because of 15 years of war, so nobody really protested. But when in 2019, the first thing they said after the appraisal, we are going to make another amnesty law. Then all the people started, I mean, there were a very strong mobilization which obliged somehow the parliament to remove it from the agenda. And they were shouting not only against the amnesty law in 2019, but also against the amnesty law of 1991. So that means that people, I mean, have back their memory about the war because this hegemony stopped somehow or was at least restrained.
And I'll come back in the second round questions to you too, Laury and Diana. But for this one, the question on election, does it really worth it to leave Geneva and go to Ba'abda and get whatever, 5,000 votes? Does it really, yeah, but really, like, this is a question, does it worth it from the inside?
It is.
Even if you lose?
Absolutely.
Why?
Because it's all a matter of power balance. In the end, those guys are not going to leave. You said something very interesting, after the collapse of the system. But who told you that the system will collapse by itself? It won't. So at some point, we have to remove them. How do we remove them? Well, we need to study all the ways to remove them. we tried the revolution. We got some results in the sense that they were really scared and that we were able to appoint a government that was slightly better than usual, but that was the extent of it. But then at least we translated it in the ballots because we got 13 change MPs. So this is what we can do. We can win municipalities. Let's win municipalities. I think it's very dangerous to believe that we will change our country from Chatham House in London. This will not happen. We have to go there underground. We have to fight in the protests. We have to fight from a local level in municipalities. We have to fight the elections at the national level. And I think it's extremely, again, dangerous to take this for granted. And by the way, they're scared of elections. Hezbollah is scared when you run against them. And the proof is that they usually send buses at 10 p.m. They try to keep the how do you call them, the ballots open until 10 p.m. And they send a lot of buses to basically bourrer les urnes, as we say in French, to make sure that they get enough votes. So they are scared of democracy. So not taking part in the democratic process and thinking that we are legitimizing them by taking part in the democratic process, to me is completely wrong, because actually they're not waiting for us to legitimize them. They're very happy to run their elections on their own. If we don't take part, it's even better for them. They'll be automatically re-legitimized and they'll keep running the country. So if we can get inside by the door, we need to get inside by the window. Any way we can fight, we have to use it and we have to fight it.
Next round of questions for Laury and Diana. You please, and then someone from here. Yes, go. Yeah. No, wait for the microphone and introduce yourself, unless you're ashamed of your affiliation, please.
Amr Salah.
Which doesn't mean that it's enough, by the way. I'm not saying elections is the only way, but I'm saying it is a critical way.
Go ahead.
So, Michael, you have mentioned several developments between 2015 and 2020. To what extent those developments have an influence on the identity division? In other words, those developments mitigate the identity division because the people feel all of them are vulnerable and they are equal in vulnerability, or that makes the people feel uncertain, that's why they are more connected to their original identity?
So, yes, please. And there was someone here.
Charles Calaf, National Bloc with Michel. My question is for Laury. I really enjoyed you slamming the ruling class in Lebanon. We all hate them. However, as a head of a political party that have actual ministers in the parliament, how much do you think you need to be able to cooperate with these members of the ruling party to be able to create an actual effective opposition against Hezbollah, which I think has been involved in everything we've been talking here, to be able to get actual political results in parliament? Like, at some point we need to do politics and not just bring the revolution inside the parliament.
Third question goes to the very right.
Hello, my name is Matthew Clare from IN2 Communications. Lebanon is a very close country to my heart. I even married a Lebanese, so I chose to to stick with you guys. My question is, within your respective fields, what are some of the kind of challenges and solutions you have encountered in terms of countering mis and disinformation?
Okay, so we'll take the second question, the last one to you in misinformation, but also the first one, and then we'll go back to you, Laury, from far. So you're the first question and the last one.
Misinformation is a plague. It's affecting the whole world through tech companies, through propaganda that is being spread by regimes. We try as much as we can to give the counter-narrative based on information and facts and the proper explanation and context of what's happening around us. I wouldn't say there is a magical formula. It's the routine, the techniques that everybody is using. So this is what we're trying to give: correct narrative based on facts and information. What was the second point? I just want to comment on the thing whether you fight within the system or besides. We have this discussion on a daily basis. I prefer, or I see myself preferring to be not within the system. I think we need to build a real narrative, a real strategy, a real political presence and political strategy based on constructive opposition that is not part of the system, that is really fully independent from the system, not necessarily taking power or coming to parliament soon, but at least to have something solid that we can call by time a real bloc, a real opposition bloc. But if we keep infiltrating within the system, this is my view, keep infiltrating from a municipality, it might work, but I think it will not give the constructive approach that an opposition could create. I think your effort in creating the Kutli Wataniye, an opposition party, is much more constructive than being part of this current parliament.
I'll come back to Michel, but let's take this also as a last question, but also to say anything last, Laury, if you have to answer the question, but also any last points. Do keep it under 50 seconds, please, and keep looking at me at the eyes.
Under 50 seconds? Oh, my God.
Yes. Go ahead.
So under 50 seconds. I think that the country is worth to fight for it, and that's why everyone that has the effort to fight for the country will fight it. As you've seen, we have different views on how to topple this regime and to bring it down. So it is, for me, like every effort that is being put is a good effort so that we can put down this regime. So you fight within, you fight outside, you create that bloc that will be from outside. So everything is legitimate so that we can end with this regime that is in power. So this is how I see it. So for the other question from our colleague from the National Bloc, it is a very important question because this is one of the issues that we faced once we were in the parliament. We were a group of 13 people within the parliament as what they called it, the change movement MPs, the change MPs, the Taghiriyin, and then we had a problem with the tactics and the strategy. Should we ally with others, or should we stay like as 12 or 13 and work together? And this is a big issue that we faced, and there were different point of views in this. We as Taqaddum, we paid a lot of heavy prices because we were always saying that yes, we do have our values, but once we are in the political arena, in the sphere, in the parliament, we need to be very political and without like losing our values, but we need to be very savvy politically and move towards like making really, like really hurting the system. Other colleagues, they had other views. I think until now, this is one of the issues that is an issue that we can have later on other spaces to discuss this issue.
Thank you very much. That was very useful. Let me go in one last round, take 30 seconds. Any last comments you want to say? We'll also address into the whole room. I know we are late and we are getting looked at. But yeah, take your last comments in 30 seconds, starting from you, Michel.
The question was, if I understood well, how people change from 2015 till today. I think it's a matter of two main components, maturity and persistence. I think that be it on the people side or on the so on the demand side, let's say, or on the political offer side and the political movement, definitely we've gained a lot of maturity, and I think that the people as well a lot of people have changed their minds quite radically when it comes to their political choices. So this has evolved positively, but it's not enough. Definitely, I think we need to be much more ambitious and at the same time much more pragmatic in the way we approach this while sticking to our values. That means that typically, probably with Laury, we should start thinking about forming one party at some point. We need to stop being 25 parties representing the same values and the same people. And here, again, we're still trying to make a self-criticism, but I think that we definitely need to be much more realistic in the power balance, especially given the criminals that we have in front. The second thing is persistence and hope. We've been persistent, but until now, the people in power have been more persistent than us. So we need to think long term. We need to keep fighting.
Yeah.
We are in an act of defense. I mean, if I look at many of you, dear friends and colleagues who have been dragged out of their countries, we still can work from Lebanon, which is not a privilege. It's something that we have worked for, and we want to keep defending because I don't want to leave, basically. I want to look and work for better country, and this is why we do what we do.
Can you keep her out of jail? Any last comments?
Okay, no, just to say that we conceived our work as being regional, so we had in mind in 2011 that we will have an Egyptian in our team, Egyptian working in Cairo, people in Damascus, people in Tunisia and in Morocco, and so on. And suddenly it became all these public spaces shrinking. Now we have a branch in Tunisia. 2 years ago, we were thinking that our plan B, if something happened in Lebanon, to go to Tunisia and we will be there. But then, no, but I mean, and we did that in order to institutionalize the exchange between the Arab countries and to have a real network, but working inside the same institution, because many times we have the opportunity to gather from all the countries. We have quite similar problems, but we don't cooperate really together. And this is happening because everybody is really with his problems and with his place. So I think if there is something to say that we should work more together, or from all the Arab countries or from the region who are really suffering of the same things, I think this is empowering all of us in all our battles.
What an important and thoughtful point to conclude on, Nizar. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Few things to note. There is a reception upstairs. Thank you for staying until 5 p.m. Please join me in thanking our exceptional panels, but also Laury from her. Big thank you to the most important speaker. To the most important speakers, which are the translators throughout the day. Thank you very much, and have a good day. Thank you.